Denise wasn't typically a night hiker. She loved the outdoors and doing different activities, but she had never gone on a hike after dark. Denise was a careful young woman, and she pretty much avoided anything that she thought would end up putting her in danger or conflict. She had been locked up at home due to the weather, but she was getting antsy to go outdoors. She planned to go on a hike Saturday morning, rain or shine, but Friday she got called up by a friend to have lunch Saturday. Denise agreed, so she pushed her hike till later that day. After Denise met her friend for lunch, she did some shopping and soon forgot about her planned hike. She was enjoying being out of her apartment anyway. She got back home in the evening, and when she saw the clothes she had laid out on her bed for her hike, she was getting ready to take a bath, but she sat down next to her hiking clothes. She couldn't come up with an excuse not to go, other than it was getting late. She wasn't going to go far, so she could be there in 15 minutes. The sun still had an hour or so before it would start setting. Denise packed what she thought she'd need for her hike: water, jerky, and a small first aid kit. Then she went to grab a small pocket knife and her pepper spray from her purse. She grabbed her keys and went out the door. Denise drove to a nearby hiking trail that was near the sound. There were different trails, and they all ended up by a lighthouse. She was excited to have this adventure, as she never did anything like this. She was feeling free and in control of her life. She parked her car, put on her jacket, threw on her backpack, and locked up her car. She headed to the trail she always took, already seeming different, since the sun was soon to set. She entered the forest and began breathing deeply and enjoyed the surrounding quiet. She walked the familiar path and still had a big smile on her face. She got to the first fork of the trail. The left would take her deeper into the forest, and the right would soon clear out into a large grass area that had a view of the Puget Sound. She chose the left, as she was feeling adventurous, and walked into a thicker and darker forest. She walked a few minutes, and she heard some rustling in the leaves off the trail, and just a few feet away from where Denise was. She turned and saw nothing moving. She assumed it was a rabbit or a bird. Denise kept hiking, and darkness undeniably surrounded her. She opened her phone and checked her location. She was about another mile from her goal, the lighthouse. As she was distracted from the trail and putting her phone back in her jacket pocket, she heard what sounded like a raspy man's voice. She quickly turned around and saw the trail behind her was empty. She looked ahead, and it was also desolate. Denise quickly felt her heart pounding inside her chest, and her breathing was visible in the cold night air. She grabbed her phone and started shining the flashlight around her. She heard another crunching of twigs and plant matter nearby, and she shone her phone towards the sound. She started retracing her steps in a backward manner as she dramatically waved her phone to shine light in all directions. She tripped on the uneven ground behind her, and she heard a grunt of joy, almost a chuckle near her. In desperation and fear, Denise reached for her pack and grasped the pepper spray in her hand. She swiftly stood up, holding the pepper spray in her hand, outward and ready to aim and fire at whoever was making her night miserable. She turned 180 degrees and began running as fast as she could on the dark trail. She started hearing heavy footsteps hitting the dirt path and catching up quickly. She turned and gave her pepper spray the inauguration it deserved. She saw a dark figure bend over and groan in pain and annoyance. Denise rebounded and sprinted back towards the parking lot. She almost threw herself at her vehicle once it was in her vision. She fumbled and managed to get her keys and unlock her car. Once she was backing out from her parking spot, she saw a dark figure watching from the trail ahead. She hastily drove away from the empty parking lot with the intention of getting home as soon as possible. Upon arrival, Denise was still energized by the adrenaline from her encounter. She reported the person from the trail, but given that she had very little information, it was likely she'd never heard about it again. Emma and a group of her friends decided to go on a hike pretty late into their day. They had gotten together to celebrate one of their birthdays. The young women had gotten together at their local shopping mall to shop, have lunch, and hang out. Once they were over the mall and uninterested in anything it had to offer, they went on a drive by the coast and into a cute little town. The girlfriends went to have a drink at a small little bar, and while they were there, the birthday girl, Lisa, suggested they hike down towards the beach area, not too far from the bar they were in. Emma was the one driving, so she told everyone they should park closer to the trail they were going to use. After a minimal drive, they arrived at a small, dirt parking lot that was by the cliff they were going to hike down on. The sun was setting, and they saw there was only one other vehicle parked across the lot. A small pickup truck. Emma, Lisa, and their other two friends hiked along the cliff and down by the beach. The view was gorgeous, and the group of friends was happily cheering and singing happy birthday to Lisa. They walked for what seemed like an hour, and it was getting dark. Emma started getting worried because she knew they had gone way off track and the cliffside was now looking the same as far as she could see. The other girls didn't seem to mind, and they were having too good of a time to start worrying. Lisa could tell that Emma was getting impatient and genuinely frightened about not knowing where they had parked up above the cliff. They had to call it a night and start looking for the small trail they had taken down to the water. The cliff was getting overwhelming for everyone, and they had a few close calls to find the trail, but that's all they were, close calls. Emma then looked at her map app on her phone, and when she tried finding the small bar where they had been earlier that day, her app would freeze, and she'd had to shut off her phone. Lisa had removed her map app to have more storage for pictures and videos, and the two other friends' phones had lost all charge. Just when Emma was about to lose her cool with her friends, they all saw a dark figure standing by the cliffside, not too far off in front of them. The girls couldn't tell if the figure was male or female, but they assumed the person had to be near the path to get back to the parking lot. They started getting loud and calling out to the person for help finding the trail. The person wouldn't respond or move. They just stood still in the darkness by the side of the cliff. Emma got a bad feeling and told her friends to stop calling out to them. When they got close enough, they realized the person was wearing a dark oversized hood over their head, completely hiding their face, and tall, black rubber rain boots. The four women stopped in their tracks, and the person standing before them was still standing there in stillness. Lisa started asking the person if they knew where the trail was, but then a deep male voice interrupted by saying,
"I've been waiting for you girls a long time."
Emma felt her stomach drop, and being the oldest of the group, instantly felt responsible for her friends and their safety. She took a few steps forward, pushing her friends back behind her. The hooded individual didn't flinch at all and had the same stance since they first spotted them. Emma was about to say something to the person, but then a bright flash of light appeared from what must have been the trail. Finally, the hooded person moved and looked up towards the light. They then quickly turned around and ran towards the direction that the girls were facing. Emma and her friends started running up the path that the hooded man had been covering with their body and shadow. They quickly approached the teen boys that had a flashlight with them and told them of their encounter and how they probably saved their lives. Everyone turned and walked together to the parking lot. The teenagers stayed put as Emma and her friends got into her car. They then watched the boys get into their car, and Emma couldn't help but notice that the small pickup truck was still parked across from her.